Welcome. We're delighted that you've joined us for another I Am Eden video featuring our faculty and staff, alumni and students at Eden Seminary. And today we are joined by Professor Ben Sanders, who is Assistant Professor of Theology and Ethics. And we are delighted, Ben, to have this opportunity to have a conversation with you about your teaching, about your scholarship, about your experience of being Eden and what that means for your vocation as a teacher and scholar of the church.
Thank you, Deb, President Krause, if you will, for taking time, friend, to give me this opportunity to talk about my experiences at Eden, my teaching, my research. I'm really excited to be here. One of the most remarkable things about being a faculty member at Eden Seminary has been that I joined a community where in so many ways the work of relating our theological educational offerings were always and already rooted in a commitment to community. I joined a community where so much of what I wanted to do was already being affirmed and amened. And what that has meant for my own vocational path is that I've been able to lean really heavily into my passion for teaching and the life of teaching, and transformative education as a really critical resource for the transformation of society, for the transformation, not just of churches, but for the transformation of the church's mission, right? To really, to rekindle and to maintain heat and energy around the fact that to follow Jesus is to be called to point to a better way of being together.
I know you're teaching some great classes this spring semester. We've just started, and we'd love to hear about your teaching this semester. What courses are you teaching and how's it going?
So I'm teaching 2 courses this spring. Both of them are new courses. The first is called Race, Faith, and American Public Safety. The class was really born out of really a resistance to my own hopelessness during sabbatical, as I was making sense of George Floyd, as I was making sense of America's continuing struggle against racism and white supremacy. I found myself needing to think my way out of a kind of pained paralysis, right? And so I developed this class, Race, Faith, and American Public Safety, because I wanted to give Eden students an opportunity, one, to think about race as an idea. The second part is to think about faith. And so we take what we've learned about race as an idea and weave that into an analysis specifically of Christian faith, but also because we have folks who don't identify as Christians or might be Unitarian Universalists. I try to leave space for faith to be sort of rooted in the Christian tradition, but also, you know, in line with who we are at Eden, ecumenical in sort of our orientation and our understanding of what faith is. And so the first part of the class is to think about the idea of race. We take that first part, weave it into the second, where we think about how race has shaped our understandings of faith. So we're going to do some really exciting sort of newer readings around these topics. These are topics that many Eden students are familiar with. But the thing that's unique about this class, I hope, is the depth with which we'll think about these ideas. And then finally, we take our thinkings on race and faith as topics and weave them into the current conversation on public safety. And here I'm specifically interested about current discourses around defunding the police, about movements to sort of rethink Americans' public safety culture. And I want students to be able to think about this current moment inside of a historically and intellectually sort of robust framework that leaves students hopefully feeling empowered to do something, which is the most exciting part about this class. The second class that I'm teaching that I'm really excited about, and I'm offering it to our Doctor of Ministry students this spring, is a class that I'm calling Black Theology as a Resource for Leadership Development. It's kind of a wordy title, but I'm really excited about it in this way. Much of what we do at Eden Seminary, and I think that in this moment, much of what we do in theological education when it's at its best, is we are developing the capacities of leaders who come to us oftentimes already committed to communities, to churches, and to causes. And so with this class, Black Theology as Resource for Leadership Development gives me the opportunity to do is take an area of academic study that is closest to my heart, which is Black liberation theology and its sort of impact and gifts and challenges to the church, and to help students think about how those gifts, those challenges, and those insights offer real insights on leadership development. And so we're going to do this by reading some classic Black theological texts alongside some works that think about what it means to be ethical leaders, to be quality leaders in a society that is so deeply shaped by racism, by hierarchy, and by inequality. I'm also team teaching the virtual conference, the Samuel Dewitt Proctor Conference, that we offer an opportunity for Eden students to attend every year. This usually takes us to a different city somewhere in the United States. The Samuel Dewitt Proctor Conference, of course, is a conference rooted in the progressive Black church tradition. It gives students just an amazing opportunity, and for many folks for the first time, to experience the Black church inside of a socially and politically progressive atmosphere that has been life-changing for so many students across racial, ethnic, gendered, sexual orientation differences. We just had really rich experiences there.
That sounds like an incredible semester. What I love about the Eden faculty is how this work of your teaching is so integral to your research and writing, from your dissertation work through to the projects that you're pursuing now, the work on Black identity and Black theology that you did in your dissertation, and how that leads to your research and writing now. Could you share with us a little bit about that?
I did my Master of Divinity at Union Theological Seminary, where one of the gifts of my educational journey was being a student of the late, great James Halcone, the father of Black liberation theology. And so my dissertation was on the meaning of Black identity and Black theological discourse. In other words, I'm convinced that there's an ongoing discourse. Sometimes it's more explicit than other times. There's an ongoing discourse, a conversation in Black theology around not just what happens to Black people in the world, right? So that Blackness is always a site of suffering, but what Black identity means, what values characterize it, what sorts of hopes shape what it means to be Black, so that Blackness certainly has something to do with what people of African descent experience in a racist society because of the color of their skin. But at the core of what Blackness means is not what happens to us, but how we respond to it. So that's the dissertation. I'm really interested in the meaning of Black identity, and I'm convinced that Blackness was never meant to mean a community of people who suffer, and they can be identified by that, though that's a component of it. The more important part of what it means to be Black is to make a conscious decision to not allow the meaning of your life, the core of your identity, to be defined by that suffering, but instead to be defined by your response to it, right? And so James Cone early on argues that what it means to be Black is to make a decision over and against the sort of structural and systematic suffering created by white supremacy, and then to decide that the meaning of your life, the value of your life, what your life will bear witness to, it's not just what folks can do to you, but how you can respond and refuse to allow that suffering and that evil to have the last word over your life. Another outgrowth of my work on Black identity and Black theology has been some of my board service that I do. So I'm always looking for opportunities to work with organizations and with folks who are really trying to make a difference in the name of faithful justice. And so in that regard, I was happy to serve on the board of the Alliance of Baptists, a progressive collection of Baptists here in the United States. And so I'm currently working I'm a co-editor on a book that's coming out trying to help Baptists rethink the cross. The cross, regardless of what kind of Baptist you are, is just a really central part, obviously, of the Christian story, but also of Christian identity. And so what we're trying to do in this book, me and my fellow co-editors, is to bring together a bunch of folks who can help Baptists think in ways that are more progressive, that are less centered in violence and an obsession with control and power, about what we learn from the fact that Jesus was crucified. What does that symbol mean?
Wonderful and exciting scholarship, and so integral to the mission of Eden Theological Seminary and our vision. You mentioned your board service. I heard that you have joined another board, the Metropolitan Congregations United Board.
MCU is just such a critical organization in terms of organizing power on the ground here among folks who really catch the worst aspects of the hell that there are to be caught here in our region, right? And there are lots of fantastic things about our region. And there are a lot of honest things that we need to be honest about in the history of this region. And so my work with Metropolitan Congregations United as a board member has been just a really incredible opportunity to be connected with folks whose passion and whose belief that St. Louis can be and is being changed is so deep. It is so compelling that folks are changing the way that conversations on the ground are had about what life needs to be like in St. Louis. So, I mean, you know, things like breaking the school to prison pipeline, closing the workhouse here in St. Louis, which is just this egregiously unethical and immoral a place where prisoners are housed in just incredibly inhumane conditions. Metropolitan Congregations United, I think that the real gift of this organization is its commitment to working with local congregations in order to build capacity and build power to affect meaningful change here in our city. One of the things I really love about MCU is we seem to have a pretty good bead on how to find some common areas of faith that can bring folks together across ideological lines that typically divide. It's hard work, as you know, but it is the work that I think is going to play one of the most critical roles in transforming our region into a more just and equitable place to live.
The impact of that is so great, and the way that can come back into the classroom and inform your knowledge of the church here locally. I think it's a really wonderful platform from which to be pursuing your vocation in all kinds of ways, and the work is so essential as you've named it. I guess the way I'd like to wrap up is to have you talk about how your experience here in St. Louis and teaching at Eden is really playing a shaping role in your vocation.
When I applied to join the faculty at Eden almost 6 years ago now, I remember very distinctly naming in my cover letter and naming again in my application my commitment to transformative theological education, which to me meant and still means that those of us who are in seminaries and who teach theology in colleges and universities across the country do our best work when the questions that drive our research, when the themes that shape our classes are grounded in the communities where we teach and where we live. I'm so grateful for the last 5.5 years because I have worked in a place where even with our small and mighty staff, right? We have so many connections to the St. Louis community and to the community of this region, and I have just felt in so many ways like I've been affirmed and like I've been really fueled to deepen my commitment to transformative theological education. So I remain committed to this day to the ways that we can transform and are transforming our city, our region, and perhaps even the state and the country, right? Through helping folks rethink what race means, what it means to be safe in public together, what it means to think about, progressive leadership. And so I am so very excited for the ways that Eden has deepened my commitment to theological education as a means to social transformation, and I'm so excited to be a part of the Eden community. I am my ancestors' hopes. I am committed. I am Eden.